Hello, and welcome to the Screen Composer Studio, a podcast about the musical storytellers behind some of your favorite films, shows, video games, and more. I'm your host, Adrian Ellis. Trevor Morris is without a doubt one of Canada's most successful exports in the screen composing world. After cutting his teeth writing jingles in Toronto, he made the jump to Los Angeles, where a chance meeting landed him a gig with his hero, James Newton Howard. This led him to Media Ventures, where he put in 4 years of incredibly hard work and learning under Hans Zimmer. At the dawn of the golden age of television, his music was part of the winning formula that saw the Tudors revolutionize the costume drama and become a massive international hit. His music also graces blockbuster shows like Vikings, video games including Dragon Age Inquisition, and big studio films like London Has Fallen and Hunter Killer, starring his buddy Gerard Butler. This two-time Emmy winner shares his candid perspective about the ups and downs in this tough and competitive business, being a Canadian in Los Angeles, the dangers of being honest on social media, and how he sees the industry changing. If you like what you hear, please consider giving us a rating and sharing the episodes with your friends and followers. This really helps us grow and share the stories of these amazing creators. And now, please enjoy this fascinating conversation with Trevor Morris. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. My first question, as far as you know, did His Holiness Pope John Paul II ever hear your music?
You know, I know where you're going with this. It was sent to him. What Aiden's referring to is my first bona fide commission. I was 13. I was going to a school for the arts, so to speak, in London, Ontario, where I grew up. And that year, the Pope was coming through Ontario, which is like, when you grow up in a Catholic school, that's like, you know, like Mick Jagger or you know, whatever coming through town. And so I got commissioned to write something for our graduating choir, which I was a part of. So I wrote it for piano and 4-part choir. And I used the text from one of the Pope's books. And the idea was to perform it live for him. But this is really when the beginning of the whole plexiglass dome on top of the Pope's car thing was becoming real. And security wouldn't let us do it. So we had it recorded in our church where we graduated and sent to him. But I don't know. I never heard back.
You kind of talk about that in other interviews, that was a kind of turning point for you in terms of, I think, commission and then just sort of thinking about a story around the music. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I got $50. You know, I made bank when you're 13 to, you know, but no, more importantly, it was the beginning of the bug of being able to, you know, tell a story through music. You know, I mean, it was inspired by his words. So it was storytelling at its infancy for me.
Right. You're definitely one of Canada's most successful exports in the film scoring world. But you came up out of London, Ontario, went to Fanshawe for music industry arts, and then you kind of got your feet wet doing more commissioned music in the jingle scene. What was it about that? I know one of the things you said, it was like making a record every day. What was that scene like back then?
I mean, this was the glory days of the Toronto jingle scene. At that time, the 3 big cities for commercials were New York, Chicago, and Toronto, the big Mad Men kind of era. So at this point, you know, I was more an engineering producer. I actually wanted to be a record producer at this point. I mean, I'm 19. I was very young and eager. So I went to Fanshawe at 18. Graduated at 19, and the day I graduated, I basically went into the workforce. But Toronto was this thriving, robust city for commercials. Every studio was booked every day, all the time. But it had a robust record industry, but it worked around the hours of jingles because they paid the bills. So we would do jingles all day and then do records all night and all weekend, which was fun. But then when it got around to me graduating more to the idea of becoming a composer, because I saw all the writers were all the cool dudes, you know, and they drove the cool cars and all that. So I sort of around 24, something like that, I moved into writing jingles. And the thing about it that I so appreciate now that I didn't even know then is every day is a new challenge. I mean, unless you have an encyclopedic knowledge of music, they say, hey, we need you to write Dixieland music today. You're like, okay, I have no idea what that is, but I'm going to find out real fast, you know, and this is pre-internet, I might add. So we took it very seriously. So we would write it, get it approved, go in the studio. We do drums, bass, guitar, B3. Then we do background singers or choir, then we do the solo singer. It's like making a record, and we use the same equipment, same technology that's made all the best records. So if we were emulating a band in spirit, we're making like a Bush kind of a record today, or we're doing classical, or we're doing Dixieland, or we're doing bluegrass. And it was an amazing, amazing way to cut my teeth and satisfy my desire for high quality, sounding stuff. I mean, we took it real seriously, and it was where I cut my teeth in writing for picture.
This is sort of prior to the days of extremely high quality samples and samples being readily available. Do you feel that part of what's made you successful and part of why you're able to create such rich and evocative sonic landscapes is because you had to make that stuff in that grind that you were in from scratch, as opposed to like sort of getting into the thing of like, oh, I can just buy that sample library and then use it and sound like everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for an hour about my personal journey through technology and samples and all that stuff. But you're correct. At the time, this is mid to late 90s now, right? So at the time, the roll-up S760 was the sampler. That's when, Hans Zimmer had 30 of them in a rack, and everyone was like that. But I had, I think I had 6 of them, and this is the beginning of orchestral samples. There were some decent strings, but mostly not. You couldn't really, you couldn't do a quote unquote mock-up like you can now. But, being kind of an engineer producer, the sonic quality of things is just as important to me as the composition. And not all composers are like this. Not that it's better or worse, but it has to sound great for me. It just does. I don't like things that sound, unfinished. So that's part of it, But I mean, now the samples are so readily available. It's open to anybody. But the missing link in here is that, when I was Hans Zimmer's assistant for 4.5 years, he kind of created the modern style of mock-up. And at that time had his own personal sample libraries from the London Orchestra that no one had. This is before Spitfire. So I learned from the best. He kind of created this craft or technique of mocking up or making orchestral samples. And there were no samples, so he made his own. So that was something I'm grateful for.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just because we're on the topic, and this is something that really struck me, especially listening to Hunter Killer. I mean, the production level on that score is just so beyond. Like, it really kind of kicked my ass, to be honest. I was listening to it and going, good God, this sounds good. Like, I thought, I was kind of feeling a little good about myself just before that. And I'm like, okay, ways to go. There's this quality to your work that is so layered and rich, as I was saying, and it's what, Christian Henson really points this out, which a lot of people don't talk, or not very many people talk about this idea of zeitgeist, this idea of capturing the sound of a moment. Mm-hmm. So you came up in that camp with Zimmer, and we'll sort of get to how you got there, but you're coming up with people like Ramin Djawadi and Jablonski and all these kinds of folks. And for me, also, Rupert and Harry Gregson Williams, John Powell. There's a kind of sound that comes out of that camp, which has to do with what I think you were talking about Zimmer doing, which was this sample creation and that focus on that sonic thing. Like, is that part of what that whole education was about, was sort of getting that focus on those sounds, or is that something you brought in the toolkit with you already? And how do you develop that? Like, how do you focus on keeping those skills at such an incredibly high level?
Yeah, it's a good question. It has a couple of different answers. One, I think one of the reasons Zimmer and I got along, at least in the early days, was that he's incredibly, beyond his music, which we all know and love, he's an incredibly smart man when it comes to engineering type thinking. And that's a gift I was given, whoever gives out the gifts. Thank you. I just have a brain. I don't know why. I don't deserve it more than anybody else, but I'm kind of good with that stuff. So we got along that way. For him, the technology is as important as the music in some strange way. So I brought my own toolbox to the sandbox with that. But with him, in his world, in the little bubble of media ventures, so remote control now, his value system is the only value system that's allowed. It's a bit of a benign dictatorship, I guess, a nice way of saying it. So his values are definitely based around cutting edge technology, doing shit no one else is doing, which really sucked for me when I was his technical assistant, because I was the one who had to make that stuff work, But By the way, can I swear on this, or is that against the?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Darren Fung set the bar very high for cursing on the show, so you're good to go.
Last time I saw Darren, he poured a beer on my shirt by accident.
Oh, good stuff.
So good. No, in Zimmer's world, there's a very high emphasis on, being able to use technology. His analogy was always like mastering an instrument. You want to be the best trumpet player in the world, the best piano player in the world. The dedication of that is the dedication you put into Cubase, which is what we use and still use.
All right.
So a bit of both. I have a huge desire for the euphonic nature of things. I love high quality recording gear. I'm the first one to say I hate network audio. I've always hated it. The reason it's popular is it's cheap, but I don't always want cheap. I want good. So it's just part of what, like, for example, Harry Gregson, he went into that world with no technical knowledge. He was really a classicist, and maybe Rupert too, to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to get educated in that. For me, it was not as hard a transition for some, because I already bring that to the table in my mind. But I think that, I keep forgetting sometimes when I run into other composers that the tech stuff doesn't come as naturally to them as it does to me. So I've come to be really empathetic about people who go, I don't know how, to do that. But if you listen to John Powell, I said this in my last interview, if you listen to John Powell's mock-up for Star Wars, it's on his Instagram page. He is the key editor. I mean, it's just, there is no, that sounds like it could be good, or that sounds like it could be a Star Wars cue, or I'm sort of feeling it's completely finished music. And there's no, wincing or thinking, will it be like, it's so crystal clear. Mm-hmm. It's a skill that he didn't have until he went through the Zimmer world and developed. So it's important to me. It was important to me before I met Hans, and now it's just in my DNA. And all my assistants and people I work with, I teach them the importance of this. And I think that people are finally starting to get away from the idea of blaming the mock-up as the bane of their existence and realizing that word should no longer exist. And it's
right.
It's incumbent upon you, the composer, he or she, to make the director feel your music, not make excuses.
Yeah. So if you're talking about, let's say, something like the Tudors or parts of Vikings, because I know that Vikings has a lot of electronic elements in it, and then moving to something like Iron Fist or Hunter Killer, when you're creating these sort of richly layered sonic textures, lots of synth stuff, lots of like processed audio, do you have a different mindset about how you're creating that stuff? Do you work differently when you're making that?
Yes and no. I think it's kind of a mindset. When you wade into the water of a new project and you're starting from scratch, from blank space, is to, like, take Hunter Killer, for example. It's in a submarine, we're subterranean a lot of the time. So I didn't envision a very shiny score, I envision everything having a little bit less top end on it. And the director, it turns out, does not really like a lot of melodic work. So I snuck in one tune, which is the USS. The rest of it is not very French horn heavy. I had to fight to get the French horn tune into that. But then the whole thing becomes dark and lots of filtering. And it's just, you set these rules for yourself on an aesthetic you have in your mind. And it happened to be this one was, we had an orchestral budget, but I ended up using only cellos and basses from the strings.
Oh, wow.
In it at all.
Okay, wow. I was wondering about that because there was a cue and I'm like, it really feels like this is a cello doing the main line here, but they're sort of up in the viola register a little bit. I'm like, yeah, there's no high string. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And what it does is it creates this sense of masculinity with, which it kind of deserved, big heads,
sure,
and very male oriented kind of cast and all that stuff. But then really the dark subterranean electronic stuff is where I just love that stuff these days. I'm all about that. I love the orchestra and I always will, but, creating some of the dark subterranean textures and all that stuff. I just, I love cultivating scores that way. It really makes me tick. So not every project needs it or is appropriate for it, but when it is, I'm all about it.
Do you for me, it feels very different to write like a string quartet-ish piece or like four-voice kind of string stuff versus the way that I would approach something if I'm making something that's more electronic-based, where there's a lot more experimentation, there's fiddling with stuff, there's sort of coming up with ideas of how to run things through different processes and see what you come out with on the other end. Do you structure your working days or your writing days? Like, do you have just like free experimentation days when you work that way?
depends on the project. TV is kind of punishing, so it's tough to do that. So, like, say, for example, Big Sky, when I was developing the language, because I knew that it was going to be a punishing schedule, I wouldn't have time to, go fishing, I call it. So I spent, some lead up time writing some cues in advance. I do this a lot where I experiment. And in this case, I hired the world's best guitar player here in LA, and it was set in Montana. So that had a Big Sky, Montana, to me, spoke of Americana, spoke of instruments like the dobro or the ukulele or things like this. Okay, well, what does that look like? How do I express tension and release and anxiety and stuff through guitars? I'm like, oh, this is cool, and it excited me. So I went and loaded my template with every sample guitar out there I could find, both textural, and both and legit, like just standard acoustic. So there's an example of creating an aesthetic in advance, and that's the best time to do it is when you have a little bit of time. Movies are much easier that way because, the truth is writing movie scores is a lot easier than writing TV scores. I know it may not be a popular truth, but craft-wise I'm talking about. It's so much easier for me.
Right.
Because you have 6 weeks to write 80 minutes of music or whatever, or 8 weeks. I write 27 minutes of score in 4 days for Big Sky,
Wow.
Schedule that I've been given. So, for me, movies are a chance to, as strange as it may seem, to relax my schedule and play more and spend more time behind me in the synth wall. But when it's something's go time, I try to do it in advance and discover aesthetics and the language and the plugins that I like, or buy some new libraries that inspire me and kind of go, okay, I'm all in on that.
Mm-hmm. When I think of the word zeitgeist and what Henson is often talking about, I think when he's discussing that, it's about keeping up with the times to a certain degree in a sound and looking where that sound is developing, keeping your ear to the ground. Do you find that's something that you enjoy, or does it cause a certain level of anxiety in terms of the competitiveness of the industry and that somebody's always trying to, cut you off or get in the lane ahead of you? And sometimes that's a sonic thing. Is it something you're always doing, searching for new sounds, figuring out what's next for you? Or is it more of an internal process where you're going, it's just going to be about me, it's what does Trevor want to hear next?
I think it's changed over time. That's a dynamic question. So I'm a huge soundtrack fan. I always had been before I was a professional, before I did this for a living. But I used to listen to every single soundtrack that came out of any current or independent movie that was on my radar. I'd say top to bottom, all of James Newton Howard's work, the late great James Horner's work. And as time goes by, I've come to sort of know who I am, and the fact that, take Hildur, there's a zeitgeist moment. She comes out of nowhere. She was Johan Johansson's assistant. She passed, and then Sicario 2 came up, and she was the natural choice, and she plays cello. So for her, she interprets storytelling through her instrument. It's not unusual, but it happened to be that between Chernobyl, which was very much an inventive score, and then the Joker, that became the zeitgeist one. Everybody, I saw a sample library that came out. It basically said, "We make Hildur like guitar tech." There's an example of what I don't do. I don't chase a trend like that. Like, oh, that's what's popular. Let's go do that. I'm over that. It's so easy to fall into that trap to try to chase success. But it's like when The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo came out, everybody on planet Earth wanted that score and that score only for like a year, maybe. And so you're trying to not get fired and you're trying to bring you to the table, but they were chasing the success of that show and that score. And producers chase success first, originality second, most of the time. So sometimes it's hard to go, okay, I know you want Sicario, or you want The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or you want Chernobyl, but I want to bring me to the table and have to wean them off that. They like the score because the score is great, which it is, and they like it because the movie was successful, or the show was successful, or she won an Oscar and an Emmy and a Grammy, every other thing you can win that year. So, that must be successful. We need to do that.
Right.
Approach is a flawed approach to creating successful content, but I've come to be empathetic of the fact that producers sometimes just need something to point at because they don't speak our language,
Sure.
So I try to answer your long-winded question, a long-winded answer. I don't listen to, once I see the show or the movie, I don't listen to soundtracks anymore. I listen to classical music, or I just sort of go in my own world and try to innovate in my own way.
Speaking of this idea of what producers are looking for and how they're sort of creating these benchmarks for what they're going to, what road they're going to go down, you've spoken about this before, this idea that Netflix is been successful largely because what they do is they green light projects and then they get out of the way. Or at least that's been sort of one of the stories that's been told about how they work with independent production companies. Do you think that that's the way forward? Do you think that's a better way of working overall in terms of how we approach these kinds of artistic and creative projects?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's a micro and a macro view of that. The macro view is, from my perspective, that Hollywood is finally changing. We're getting rid of Harvey Weinstein's of the world, Scott Rudin's and Joss Whedon's probably next. And these guys who've been megalomaniacs and just terrorizing people. So that is changing. We're being more inclusive, of course, now. I honestly applied for a job last week that I knew half the producers on. They said we're only accepting submissions from females. Mm-hmm. So we're there. The pendulum has swung all the way that way.
Right.
So that's the big view of that. And one of the examples that comes to mind that I think is an amazing story is Shonda Rhimes, who is just a powerhouse.
Right.
She's for those who don't know who she is, you should know who she is. Showrunner, writer, creator, Grey's Anatomy, among other things, our longest running medical drama, 18 years running. She had a very lucrative deal with wherever she was with before and just moved to Netflix. And in her interview, she said the whole reason was, she's like, I made a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream for this studio, and they're still giving me notes, like a lot of them. She's like, basically, in so many words, leave me alone. I'm pretty good at what I do. You're making tons of money. Just sit back. And Netflix promised her this. You come over here, you can do whatever you want with almost no oversight. And that's why she moved. And now she's the highest paid showrunner in the history of television. I think she took the job not so much for the money, maybe what the money stands for, because she's a strong Black woman, is a good thing. But what she really went for was autonomy. So it's tough because I love the collaborative aspect of this job, but there are times when you get someone in the mix who really shouldn't be honestly commenting on the music in the same way that I can't comment on set design. I could vote for the Oscars. I vote for things that I can speak to. And who am I to vote on costumes? It doesn't make any sense, right? So I think the idea of being on a project where you're given more latitude to be creative is better. I think no notes is not the way to go. I don't like that. I like some back and forth that shows that the clients care. But I'm hoping the idea of chasing the latest trend, it will never go away. But I think there's so much more to be had from a creative being than having them chase something else. Michael Dana are probably our greatest, and Howard Shore, our greatest Canadian composers. Dan always talks about putting on a costume. It's like, why are you're not being you, you're putting on a Zimmer costume and being him. I just saw a comment in Perspective Forum today. Someone said that the client said, you really Zimmered the shit out of that. He was so excited. And I'm like, is that a compliment? Or I didn't comment, but in my head, I'm like, that sounds like congratulations. You sound like someone else. I don't know. I think that the idea of it just being really top heavy, megalomaniac, super control freak kind of stuff is starting to mellow a bit, and people are actually embracing creativity. At least that's the hope. That's my hope. The trend goes there.
Yeah, it does feel like that's the Netflix, perhaps in some of the good things that it's doing in that way, are kind of proving that you don't need to have a stranglehold on every single decision, and you can hire good people and let them do what they do. But I agree with you. I like notes too. I mean, it is that nice because you don't have all the best ideas necessarily, and sometimes you just need to talk to someone who goes, well, what about this? And you go, oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah, let's try that.
Totally. I think that we get intellectually really close to it. And one of my favorite executive producers, actually, is a very close friend of mine, Sheila Hawken, there in Toronto. We've worked together for so long. We have such a shorthand that when she really disagrees with me, instead of being defensive, I go, well, she must really see something that I don't see, because we respect each other enough to go like that. Or if I think she's wrong, I'll be like, you know what? I'll rewrite the cue for you, but I really think what I did is the way to go. Would you at least promise to bring it to the dub stage and give it another look on another? We have that very, mutual respect. And to me, that's the ultimate, it's just the way it should be. They hire you to be you, to do good work. And when they have some notes, it means they care and they want to sculpt it. That's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Not every that's it, but
I love that. I love that as a negotiation tool. Okay, I'll do this your way, but promise me you'll review this at the dub stage again. That's great. I'm going to use that. So going back to when you were 26, you were working in the studio doing the jingle stuff, and you're with David Green and Amin Bhatia. And that's sort of where you get your first sort of shot at working in television proper. Is that right?
Correct. So I was a jingle writer in town, and at that time, Amin Bhatia was a rock. Oh, he still is a rock star. I'm just saying, at that time, he was really on the ascent in his career, if not already heading toward the peak. And there weren't a lot of projects in Toronto. It's not like it is now, where it's a robust, thriving thing. So there's only a handful of composers who did everything. This will segue to why I moved to LA in the first place. But Amin was doing, a lot of good work, and he just got overwhelmed and got this show and said, "Hey, it's a kind of a sci-fi sort of thing. Do you want to co-write it with me?" In retrospect, I don't even know why me, but I was so thrilled that he would give me a chance. He was the first guy to really give me a chance to say, I see something in this kid that I think could be worth trying. And so we collaborated on the score. It's really somewhat cheesy, but fun show called Codename Eternity back in the day. But we did 22 episodes of this, and I did half the score, and he did half the score, and it was my first time being responsible for that kind of music and everything. So, and David Green was his mentor, and I know David from the engineering world, and his wife was a teacher at MIA when I was there, Jan Green. So for me, that world was very small, but it was my first real chance to see how the sausage was made in the sense that David was an administrator and mixer, because Min didn't mix. So David mixed all his stuff, and Amin just making great work and having me along for the ride. So it was my first chance to write a television show. Ironically, I was about to move to LA. I was right on the edge, and then I stayed back for a year to do this because I couldn't pass it up. When you're young, you think you'll only get one shot and never work again, so you don't want to say no to it.
And I mean, when you did decide, you weren't really super excited. You're still wearing your Toronto Maple Leafs hat. You're a big Toronto fan. You didn't really want to move to LA. You did so anyways. And I think you tell a great story about the initial shock of having your wonderful life savings sort of be reduced to ashes by the exchange rate. What was the culture shock like when you landed in LA? What were some of the first experiences you had there?
Yeah, I mean, just to back up the genesis of the story is correct. That is, I'm like late 90s. I'm in my late 20s. I really wanted to be a TV composer. I'd done enough jingles. I knew that for me, I call it the alchemy of music and sound, the 1 + 1 = 3 thing. And there was no white space. It was only 4 composers who did everything. It was John Welsman, Min Bhatia, Jack Lenz, and someone else, and that was it. And this is the part of Canada that's changed a lot, and there's a little bit of tough love for the country that I love. Is at the time, Canada wasn't interested in new. They didn't want to discover anybody. What they wanted was what worked. So every time I tried to get in the door on a project, like, no, we're good. We don't want another young voice. I think that's changed dramatically. But when I was there, that was the case. So I said to myself, I'm going to go to LA. I'd heard horror stories of people going to LA and getting their ass kicked. I'm like, well, I'm a resilient guy, but I'm going to go. I'm going to give it a go. If it doesn't work, I can always come back and write jingles. At this point, I was really at the height of my jingle career, making good money. I was one of the known guys in town. So I just moved there. It's a cliche, but I mean, I with all my stuff, packed it up and just went there with no plan, no job, no prospects, no nothing. And no credit rating, as I found out the hard way. LA was a culture shock. And the only place that would rent to me was this Indian couple who just happened to love Canadians. They picked up on my accent and they said, "Are you Canadian?" There's a guy in, true story, there's a guy in scrubs on his break writing a check for the first month's deposit. Doctor, right? I'm going, okay, well, I guess I didn't get this place. And they looked past the doctor and everyone else and came over to me and said, "Are you Canadian?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "The house is yours."
Wow.
And so this is where it gets interesting. I had saved, at the time, all the money in the world. I saved $32,000. My mom lent me some money, whatever. And this apartment was, I want to say $2,000 a month or something, whatever it was, right? So they said, "Okay, I'll tell you what, you have no credit rating. We'll need you to pay first, last, security, and a 4th month deposit to sort of make," I'm like, totally fine. I'm like, "Please take my money." So that's $8,000, right?
Wow.
The Bank of America, I deposit my $32,000. They hand me back the little slip, and your deposit is your rebalance is $17,900. And I nearly it chopped one of my legs off. This was the days of Canada being 50% exchange rate from the States.
Right. Oh my God.
So that was really dispiriting. I went into credit card debt pretty immediately. But America is a very different country in so many ways. The money is all the same size and all green and hard to sort, versus British or Canadian money. The streets, the intersections are bigger. So running an orange light feels totally different here than it does in Canada. Little things that you would only know if you knew the difference between the two. My wife always corrects me that she says you can say California, not America, because I don't know anything else about America except for Apple.
Right.
It was a culture shock, man. Everything's different, and the size of the streets and the money and the culture, and you can buy alcohol at any corner store. Just things that are just different, that were a culture shock to me and took some getting used to. Just being from Canada, the weather, of course, too, traffic.
How long were you on the ground grinding before, without really a glimmer of hope or direction?
Oh, a good year and a half.
Wow.
A good year and a half. Yeah. One of the as soon as you get to Canada, as soon as you get to the States, the first thing you do is look for other Canadians. You're a very gregarious bunch, us. And a voiceover friend of mine who lived in Hollywood Hills was having drinks with me. He said, "Can I give you one piece of advice?" I said, "Please." He goes, "Don't go home." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Just stay, stick it out, because so many people come to LA from Canada or anywhere else who are hotshots in their business, and they get humbled and they go home with their tail between their legs." He's like, "LA is going to make you work for it, but it's so worth it. It's a 10x exponential world. It's actually more than that at the time in terms of opportunity, but you got to not leave." And you know what I mean? It was like, all right. Rena Romano, my voiceover buddy from Canada, said that. And at that point, I was determined to go, okay, I was just going to stay until either I run out of money, you know what I mean, or whatever. And so that resolve got me through that first year and a half.
There's a fantastic story you tell about getting hooked up with one of your heroes through a weird recommendation on a singer for a demo that you're working on. Can you tell that story?
A great one. So James Newton Howard was and still is my idol, film score idol, and we're friends now because I worked for him for a while. But at the time, I was pitching on something, and the score for A Perfect Murder had come out from him, which with Gwyneth Paltrow and Michael Douglas. I thought the score was just so cool. And there was this angelic, beautiful voice on there, and I was demoing for something, and the only other composer that I knew was a female, and I said to her, "Do you know a female singer who sounds something like this for my demo?" She goes, "Yeah, I'll send her over to you, pay her a demo fee." She comes over, I record her, sings beautifully. We got chit-chatting. She's like, "You seem to be good at engineering stuff," because I was engineering the session. I said, "Yeah, in a previous life, I was an engineer, but I really want to be a composer." Nothing of it. A couple days later, called my friend Sophia and said, "Hey, thanks for the recommendation of the singer. Man, she sounds a lot like the girl from She goes, "Dude, pick up the soundtrack and look at the credits. It is Lisbeth Scott, one of our great singers." So it was actually her. And I had no clue at all until after she left. I felt like an idiot. But to finish the story that you haven't asked yet, is Lisbeth was really good friends with James Newton Howard's right-hand man, engineer, Jim Hill. And their go-to assistant was sick like ill sick kind of thing. So she called me and said, "Hey, do you want to do some sub-in, basically assistant engineering," which is something that I'd done for years and years, back to my technical skills, helping open doors for me. I said, "Sure." She goes, "Okay." And she didn't tell me who yet. And so the phone rings, and it says J&H Productions on the phone, and like a schoolboy, I'm like freaking out, right? I got to work for James and his engineer, Jim, who's still a dear friend of mine, as just, plugging in patch cords and Pro Tools and stuff like that. But I got to walk in the door. I'm a year and a half in LA with no prospects, getting pretty bleak. And now I'm standing next to James Newton Howard, my personal hero, in this gorgeous facility, latest technology, working on a big Disney animated, $100 million movie. And it was just like, all right, I'm never leaving. This is what I want to do. I'm going to die trying. But it was an interesting connection that got me there.
And that connection, while it didn't turn out that you could stay with James, ended up getting you in the door at Remote Control at that time.
Yeah. We're on the scoring stage, the late Tadeo scoring stage, and we're on break. And I said, "James, may I speak with you, please?" I said, "Listen, I know I'm here as a we did 2 movies together, or 2 or 3 movies together. I said, I know I'm here as a Band-Aid, but I'd love to work for you. I was just like, fortune favors the bold in my head. I got to ask, right? And at the time, just before James worked with Hans, he was a very small team. It was just him, a receptionist, and his guy, Jim. He said, listen, man, I don't have a job for you. I appreciate it. And I was kind of like, I'll do anything. He said, but you seem good with technical skills. I know that Hans is looking for somebody. And I was a huge admirer of Hans, of course. And so he picked up the phone and said, hey, I have this kid. And he said, send him over. And their studios are 4 blocks apart from each other. So I walked from James Howard's to Media Ventures. And I walked in the door, and his current assistant was quitting as a friend of mine. I'm like, so weird. And so I walk in, and Hans walks around in a circle around me, smoking a cigarette, never making eye contact, says, I can't do the German accent. I wish I could, but he's like, so you as a kid was the good skills and whatever. And then I'm like, yeah, and I'm kind of nervous to meet him because he's such an icon as I was James. And he walks out the door. I said to my buddy Jim, I said, what just happened? He goes, you just got hired. I said, okay, when do I start? He goes, you just started. I went in the door and didn't leave for 4.5 years.
Wow.
But that's how that happened. So
right.
It was, my technical upbringing, my technical skills mixed with musical skills, mixed with people skills, mixed with whatever, and the dots connected like that.
I know this is kind of a crystal ball question, but can you imagine how your career might have turned out differently had you ended up staying with James, coming up alongside him, being his assistant, maybe writing with him? Do you think your world, your approach, even the sound of your music, do you think it would be different?
Well, of course, to some extent, but that would have been my preference, In an honest moment, I like to say I write in my own style, but we're all like, James is the first one to say that his score, The Fugitive, is very much him channeling Jerry Goldsmith. That was, we're artists. What comes out of us is what went into us. I'm much more of a James kind of a writer than I am a Zimmer kind of writer. I got asked to do the Hans Zimmer for so long because when I graduated, everybody knew I was one of the experts at his sound. And at first you got to do what you got to do to get a job. But
sure,
I don't really write like that as much anymore. I have it when needed. But no, I think working with James would have changed my career trajectory in a different way. But I've had so many successes and so many failures and hardships and just things that I couldn't even tell you that, that were bad. But you have to be grateful for them all because whatever they were, they got you to where you are.
Right.
Those questions are fun to think about, but they're irrelevant to me because it didn't happen that way.
Right.
And my path was to go through Hans Zimmer's world, and he happened to not care for my music at all, or and didn't help me. I had to take my experience with him and be grateful for it, and just build my own career brick by brick. It's funny. I just to put this out there, everyone associates this small group of people who came in the door and got out the door of his world and became successful. We got John Powell and Harry Gregson left at the same time. Ramin Djawadi, Steve Jablonsky, Jeb Sinelli, I guess to an extent. Me, them, him, us, whatever, right? 10 of us. Okay. Hans gave Harry and John a collaborative movie called Ants for DreamWorks. Then the next DreamWorks thing. And then now John Powell has a relationship with DreamWorks. And, he gave Steve Jablonsky to Michael Bay because I think he was sick of Michael Bay. So then Hans gave him, this is true, he gave him Transformers, and that began Steve's career. All these guys are incredibly talented. It's not to take anything away from their talent. They're monster composers, but they got a little lift, a little help, a little, and Hans just didn't do that for me. He just didn't care for my music or me. I don't know which. I'll never know. So, I kind of flourished getting out of that world and building my own place despite him, not because of him. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I'm just being honest with you. Like Ramin got some help. He got his first studio movie because Hans called the head of Warner Brothers and said, hey, use this kid for that. Off he goes.
Yeah.
He helped Jablonsky with Transformers and John Powell, but with me he didn't do anything. So which is incredibly tough for me considering how much of my life I gave that man.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And like, for example, Lorne Balfe and I grew up through he was behind me in the timeline of things, but he was just a really hard worker, really talented guy who just kept hanging around and got the shit kicked out of him for a long time. And eventually, and now he's probably one of the hottest composers working, this guy just does 6 movies a year and 4 television shows, bananas. So I always want to just clear the air about that, I'm not lucky in the sense that Hans helped me. I'm fortunate enough to be through his world, which gave me some street cred, but he didn't help me.
Right.
if not, maybe even the opposite. But
so jumping forward a bit, well, not really jumping forward, but to a later question that I was going to ask, but you've been very candid on social media and in general with, your journey and the ups and the downs, and especially the challenges and how you sort of handle them. And I'll never forget this one post that you made on the Perspective Forum where you're driving back and you were just talking about having gotten the shit kicked out of you, right? Like you just were like, this was a tough day. I was very hopeful about something and it didn't go my way. That's the way it is. Onward we go. I'm going to go play golf or whatever, Right. And I just wonder, like I feel like that kind of a open approach to it, the fact that you're willing to talk about it, that you're not pretending like things are perfect all the time, gives me the sense that you have some sort of way of dealing with the times that life really punches you in the face. What kind of things do you do when it's just like it seems like everything is supposed to go your way and then it doesn't work out?
Man, thank you for that. I think that I didn't intend to start this trend of being honest that way, but I mean, we all know that social media only has two sides: shiny, right, everything's awesome, or I have cancer and I'm going to die next week. There's nothing,
right?
And I just did that because I was just really frustrated. And by the way, I got in big trouble for that video, so I learned my lesson, and to a certain extent. But the amount of outpouring I got from people saying, "Wow," it's people who thought of me as a big composer. I don't really think of me that way. I think of me as a kid from Canada, but they were like, "Oh, even he has a tough day." I'm like, we all have, like everyone. John Williams may have a tough day now and then, maybe not like me, but I was just being candid about it because, I don't know, it made people realize that everyone, I doubt you'll ever see Brian Tyler do that, he's always polished and shiny and he's a fantastic composer, but his image is such. I'm just like,
if he had a bad hair day, that would shock the crap out of me.
Neither do I, by the way. So
there you go.
But no, I think that understanding that you're going to get punched in the face, and that, quick sidebar, become a composer in today's age is really like being an entrepreneur, which is a fancy word for business for yourself. But when you're an entrepreneur, your successes are yours and your failures are yours. It's not your agent, it's not the director, it's not your assistant, it's you. You get punched in the face, it's your fault. You have to just realize that. Now, having said that, I just lost a movie a really, really cool TV show. I mean, just right up my alley. And I knew the showrunner, who's the boss, but the production company wanted someone else, and I didn't get it. And on paper, it should be a shoo-in for me. You know what I mean? I'd lots of success with other people, and it just went a different way. And that's tough, and you go, there'll be another one, I guess, but when you're young, it seems like there won't be another one. And you take those really hard. And, I think we all do our grieving in secret. I remember Ben Affleck talking about borderline becoming an alcoholic on one of the superhero movies. He would just come back to his room, and not in public, and he would just sit there and just drink scotch till he fell asleep, trying to figure out how to deal with the day,
Oh, wow.
So, we all have our ways, and I do speak a lot about health and wellness, and I wish I could speak more about it because I think that's something that's not talked about. You're expected to be Iron Man or Iron Woman, and it's just hard because I can't name their names, but I've seen plenty of really, really elite high people in different positions, composers, engineers, producers, who've been broke down and start crying at midnight. I mean, it can be tough,
Yeah. I guess when you play at that elite level, that comes with it. You have to deal with elite problems and at a very high, tough level. I mean, I think that just that idea of being so close to something like that, and then it's taken away for things that are beyond your control, that would be one of the toughest things. Like, if I was going for something and I got my ass handed to me because they said, you're just not good enough yet, I'd be like, that's hard, but at least that gives me a sense of control. I can do something tomorrow. I can work on getting better. I'll get another chance and we'll fight another day. But if you're like, that was supposed to be mine, or you feel like, everything was said, like as you say, on paper, that's supposed to be a shoo-in. That's a tough thing.
It is a tough thing. And I think that the one thing that I will say I'm proud of is whatever success I've had, touch wood, I didn't deserve it more than you did. But no one can say I didn't work hard for it.
Right.
I'm a worker. I did to age myself. I did the math. I entered the workforce at 19 in Toronto, and when I turned 49, I've been in the business for 30 years. I did the math on the number of hours I've worked, and I rounded it down to 50 years of hours.
Oh my God!
So 50 years old in life and has worked 50 years already. It makes no sense, right?
Right.
I think the hard work ethic is the only true through line to success that I've ever seen. Everybody know all the composers that you just mentioned, whether it be it Ramin or Jablonski, those guys, even if they were given it by Hans, they still have to do the work,
Absolutely.
They just got a start on it. But hard work is an important thing. And I always say you can't have $1 million dream with a $1 work ethic. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a great point. This podcast is brought to you by the Screen Composers Guild of Canada, celebrating its 40th year in 2020. The SCGC is a national association of professional music composers and producers for film, television, and media, whose mission includes promoting the music, status, and rights for film, television, and media composers in Canada. Special thanks to the SOCAN Foundation for financial support. For more information on the SCGC, please visit www.screencomposers.ca and follow us online at Screen Composers. And now, back to our show. You talk about, your standard day at remote control would be 18 hours minimum, sometimes stretching upwards to 30 on extreme times. And now you work 8 hours a day for the most part because you've got a family, other commitments, and you just want to live a more balanced life as much as that's possible. But you still get as much, if not more, work done. Is that a product of you being better at your craft and having tools and methods that really work for you in terms of getting stuff done? If you could go back and do it differently, but only with what you had available in terms of tools at the time, would you work differently, or do you think that's just the way it goes? You had to go through the grind. Those were the lessons you had to take.
For me personally, just all I can speak to, that's just the way it had to be.
Right.
My first television show, I worked 18, 19 hours a day because I wasn't good enough to do it any faster. I was in over my head, which that's how you learn.
Yeah.
Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Courage is on the other side of the door of fear. You don't get the courage before you go in, which sucks. But no, for me, I absolutely had to evolve in my own way to be able to have the skill set, my craft is very finely tuned. My technology around me is set up for me to be successful and sound good and all that stuff. So my ability to work 8 or 9 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week versus 7 hours a day, 18 hours a day is just an evolution of being better at what I do. And if I get a time crunch, I work harder and I can pull it off. I've never missed a deadline in my career, stuff like that. But I think, I did a video called on my AMA series called 6 Minutes a Day, The Path to Being a Pro TV Composer. And I got tons of 6 minutes a day, 6 whole minutes in one day. I'm like, dude, there isn't a pro composer who doesn't do 9, 10, 11 minutes of music in a day as needed. It's just that's the gig,
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were shocked. And I broke it down. I gave my method on how to do it. If you haven't seen it, it's on my YouTube channel. But
it's great. Absolutely. Yeah.
More manageable. But it's that's the gig. What are you going to do? Not deliver? So I just don't fuck around as much as I used to. I don't really surf. It may seem like I'm on social media all the time, but I'm not. I kind of post and, I'm motivated to be done to enjoy my family. Family dinner is a ritual for me it takes a lot for me to miss that. My agents hate me because the way it works in Hollywood is all the producers at the end of the day at 4 o'clock or 4:30 want to offload all their shit so they can go home with a clear conscience. So they call my agent to get answers on something. My agent calls me at 5:30 and I don't answer. They're like, dude, I've been trying to reach you. I go, uh-huh. They go, no, so-and-so asked me about, and then it's time sensitive. I go, uh-huh. Well, I was having dinner with my family. And I've trained them to basically leave me alone for those 2 hours. So I won't answer the phone for anybody for anything. Seriously, I won't. I'm just nope. Even if it's
wow.
I offer you Star Wars, I'll call you in an hour. It's so and Fridays are the worst, right? Friday, the phone rings off the hook at 5 o'clock because all the producers want to have the weekend off, making sure that you're busy. So here's our notes that we haven't given you in 4 days on Friday at 5 o'clock.
Right.
Awesome part about our job. But so for me, if I get to the end of the day and I didn't get my minutes done or something, I'll come back in at 4 a.m. the next day to make it up, not go back in the studio at night. That's all.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's get into some of the shows. So would you say it's fair that, or was it fair to say rather, that the Tudors would be the sort of thing that put you on the map?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. It wasn't my first project, but it's a zeitgeist moment. There's the word of this podcast, but it was a show that everyone who touched it in any way went on to huge success. I mean, the costume designer, Henry Cavill became Superman, the actor. It just, it was an amazing, amazing project that came to me, through, and here's a great story. It's a true story. The executive producer, Sheila, I mentioned her earlier, who's the one who kind of greenlit me to be, to get the show. I'm sure Michael Dana was on the list and the Mimity and everybody else, but I was living in LA at the time. Years later, we became friends. We were having dinner in Toronto. I said, let me ask you something. If I had lived in Toronto and pitched on the show, would I have been as high up the ranking as I was? She goes, no. You were definitely had an LA thing about you that brought you into a level above some of the other people, perception-wise. So there you go. It was just kind of whatever. I mean, but they knew I was working with Hans Zimmer and we were doing, I don't know, Pirates of the Caribbean or something, huge movie of the day. So that helped, but to answer your question, it put me in the map. It put everybody in the map. I mean, I submitted for and won my first Emmy on the first season, which never happens in Hollywood.
Wow. Yeah.
No one ever, if you get nominated, it's kind of a welcome to the club and you should just be happy to be here.
Sure.
Which I was, but then I won. So yeah, it's very fair to say that the Tudors was the show that put me on the map.
I mean, that sort of went on. It's sort of interesting to look at these things in retrospect because, of course, now, hindsight is 20/20. We can say, well, it was because of this and this and this and this, and this is why. And there's sort of this thing that's said about the Tudors that they sort of reinvented the costume drama. There must have been something in the water. Did you feel at the time like, whoa, this is going to be a big thing? I can feel it's like every department is working at this sort of like magical level?
No. I had a very rough go on the first episode because no one knew what we were really doing. Well, Greenblatt, who runs NBC Universal Comcast, he was the head of Showtime. He was the guy who created 6 Feet Under and all that stuff. He had a vision for it, but no one really knew what it was other than we're not doing Men in Tights and we're not doing BBC Masterpiece Theater. And, King Henry was a redheaded, tall dude, and they put Johnny Rhys Meyers in as him. So we're already taking the Versace model at the time, maybe it still is. We're already taking liberties, but no, I mean, we didn't really know what we were doing and how impactful it would be until the first season, and it was just like it was such a huge success,
Did you feel? I mean, I'm imagining the answer is yes, but maybe you can sort of walk through what the process was in terms of like them saying, okay, we need something new and fresh, and you're on this new thing and this pretty big deal, and you're there's probably an enormous amount of pressure on you when someone comes to you and says, we're doing it new, like don't do what the standard thing is. What do you even do? How do you start?
There's an evolution. I went from it scared me to death to me loving it. I love. There's a show I'm really close to getting that I touch wood that will allow me to do that is create from scratch, and I love it. It's super hard, so you got to kind of embrace the suck and then embrace the as Navy SEALs say, a lot. But I want that. You know what I mean? I don't want a temp with Forrest Gump in it, and you know what I mean. I want to create a new world. With the Tudors, I didn't know how to do it, so I was just winging it. It was a combination of orchestral programming, synth orchestral stuff, and me looking at period pieces of music, period instruments at the time. Dulcimers and bowed Appalachian this and plucked that, and rubbing it all together to create this sense of 1550 England. And it evolved over time. And I think my proudest version of this is Vikings, where, there was a shorthand with the producers. They all trusted me, and it was still tough. I still had to write the first episode a couple of times, but at least I knew what I wanted to do was bring a quiet electronicness to it, which I think I did.
Mm-hmm. There's a really interesting approach. Speaking of Vikings now, and I was going to ask about that, before you quote unquote crack the code of that first episode, you say 3 to 4 times, having to write it again. You're not really going for an ethnomusicological kind of approach to it, saying like this is what Norse music would have sounded like at the time. You're using electronica, as you said. That's an interesting sort of way of describing it, quietly electronic. One thing that really sort of strikes me with that score is I feel like you're using distortion as an instrument. You're distorting all sorts of different sources. And that creates this harmonic excitement. It creates these overtones. it has a life and an excitement in the same way that I think a musician brings to the table when they're performing. Is that a conscious thing that was sort of used, like you're using distortion as an instrument?
Oh, very much so, yeah. There's tons and tons of plug-in tweaking that goes on, some very subtle, some very obvious, to take anything and make it sound a little bit more modern, a little bit more different, Oh, for sure, but the challenge was that they decided the look of Vikings was to be very true to the time and rustic. So part of being a Viking was the wilderness, the environment was a character. You can go on a hike and die, so you could fall on a rock. And so it was shot very, to give you an example, the opposite of that would be Man on Fire or George Miller's 300, where it's very saturated colors and very hot, I call it, colors. Well, Vikings doesn't have that. So to put the music on top of it, where I'm creating that level of saturation, you had to sort of do it with some level of finesse. You just can't rock out on it. You know what I mean? You got to kind of, but it deserved it sometimes in the battles to be gritty and stuff like that. That's where it modernized itself for me, is when, we would bring the electronics right to the forefront and put an 808 kick in there and stuff that, Ludwig Göransson's all being praised, as awesome as he is, for putting 808 in the score to Black Panther. I'm like, but no, it was a chance to create that language. And again, back to what you just said, being an ethnomusicologist, I don't advise this for anybody, is to go into the approach as a scholastic point of view of being, this is what was used. Like, who cares? What matters is when you blow into a flute, does it evoke for you, the place you want to be? If you have a bansuri or a ney, which may not be anyway close to ethnically where you need to be, but to you it just sounds like it belongs in that world.
Mm-hmm. Right. So Vikings is now closing out in its final season with 7 altogether. Is that right? And then you're working on a new Vikings spinoff. How did you keep track of and develop all these character themes, all these different sound motifs? You talk about cues that are traveling cues. Of course, characters have their cues. Moments have their themes. How do you keep track of all that and then go, okay, this is where we left this. This is the dynamic level. This is where the character's at back, 2 seasons forward. We need to have this developed. Is there a system you have for that, or is it just kind of an intuitive approach?
I'm so lazy, dude. I don't have a system for that. My buddy Michael Levine, who scored Cold Case for 100 years, had a binder of themes. There's a guy who's got his act together. I didn't. But it was fun by the end between Sheila and the music editor, Yuri Gorbachev, who's in Toronto, and myself. It became this game where we'd hear a cue in the temp, which is all mean we go, where's that belong to? I think it belongs to season 4 when Ragnar did, or, Lagertha did this, and Yuri said, actually, no, you reuse that in season 4 from season 2 when she did it became a game after a while. There are certain themes that were just iconic that stayed, and Ragnar watching his family leave theme stayed long after he died in the show. It's when you're in that space for so long, it's kind of always on your mind. But because we would do 2 seasons in a row, we do 20 in a row, and they would air 10 chunks. So I would just so into the show, and so into the characters. I can't give away some spoilers, but there's a couple of characters that have definite sounds that as they reoccur and stuff like that. But that's the joy of it, But no, I'm not that organized. I'm sort of, to be honest, the picture editors are better at it than me. They have an encyclopedic knowledge of what theme was used for what character and, stuff like that. They did a better job of that than I did.
Are you, I think that, Shore's work on Lord of the Rings is sort of like the nth degree to maximalism in terms of how many themes you can develop for a single thing. Where do you put yourself on a spectrum of how on one or the other side? Personally, I'm very big on monothematic kind of things, like choosing 1 to 3 really big statements and then seeing how many different ways you can position those things. Are you on one or the other spectrum? Do you have any thoughts on that, like using a ton of themes versus using very few themes?
I think it depends on the project. If it's a 2-hour movie and the arc of attention for your listener is 2 hours, that's one thing. If it's TV where you don't hear it for a week or even another night, it's a little bit different. But I find that I love thematic, motivic writing whether it's a sound or a plugin or a distortion or a theme or a French horn melody or whatever. I love thematic things that are attached to characters or even ideas. But if you get too many in there, you're asking too much of the audience, and it just becomes a little bit of an intellectual kind of, back scratching kind of thing. So I think that, James Horner is the great example. I remember as a kid listening to his scores going, how did he get away with that? How did they let him write a 32-bar melody? The picture's going by and he's just ignoring that. And he's just doing this big soaring tune. And I was always like, he must have some special permission to write, that kind of stuff. And it's just how he wrote, big arcs. That's what we call cinematic writing. And the opposite of that would be Bugs Bunny, which is, really TV-ish writing. So I always look for a theme. I always look for an angle to attach to a character, to attach to an idea. Here's a little tip for younger composers I learned is attaching a theme to an idea, say betrayal, has more legs than a character. Because the character may come and go or evolve, but the idea of betrayal is a part of, if that's a theme, like say the Borgias. So there was always little themes for that. There was, Zimmer's theme for Gladiator is like the lust, the husband or the brother sister themes when opens the show. And so those things have more legs, But I do love that, finding things to attach to the screen, to characters. But like I would say I'm in the middle, I guess is my answer. Like I've never not written a thematic show or movie in my life. I don't know how to not do that,
Right.
Pads and all that stuff is just, it's not my jam,
That's interesting. I mean, I think that idea of attaching themes to ideas is really powerful. If I think back again to Lord of the Rings, the Ring theme is the one that always comes to mind first. And I think it is because when you hear it, you don't think about the physical object, the ring. You think about what it means, where it's traveled, all the horrible things that have happened to everyone that has been in contact with this item of power. And it's really about that power and the darkness of that power. And it's so powerful for that. So I think that's a really interesting approach and a way of thinking about those kinds of things and moving through that.
Absolutely. That theme is genius because it's such a colorful melody with that major seventh pulling up and all that stuff. But it has an air of mystery to it. So you're spot on. You're not scoring the actual gold ring. You're scoring what it represents in the energy of the universe. Much like, what jumps to mind is the Ark of the Covenant theme from Raiders.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome little ghosty. Even talking about it, seeing a picture of it. Here comes the theme, and it's this thing out there. It's not a gold box. It's the power of the Ark. Those things are a great way to get lots of legs out of a theme, rather than attaching it to a person or an object or a place or a noun. Of course.
Right. One thing that comes through in your social media as well is that you have a great love of great food and great wine. And it looks like lately looking at your IMDb list, you've gotten more into scoring documentaries about wine. Is that something that you followed a rabbit hole down? Did you push for that? Or is that just something that came to you because people saw, here's a guy who obviously has this great passion for this stuff?
It's a funny story. It came to me because a director sought me out, which doesn't happen that often in your career, but he directed a movie called SOMM, S-O-M-M, following the plight of four young guys going for their master sommelier degree, which, if you guys know what that is one of the hardest tests on earth. And this is when wine was really becoming popular and taking over the world. And I personally watched that movie 10 times. It's my kind of geeky science. And I actually inspired me to go get my sommelier degree. So I have a level 1 sommelier degree, which is nothing. It's not like a master's degree. It's, whatever. But so that director reached out to me, unbeknownst to me or him, that we both had his movie in common a couple of years later. And I'm like, I'm in. And, documentaries have no money. You do it for the love of it. But and now he just basically won't leave me alone. He's like, he's got one about, the Judgment in Paris, which was represented all wrong in Bottle Shock. He's shooting him. He's a crazy documentary. He's a gorilla. He's awesome, that guy. So we get along really well as friends, and we just like him and we like the subject matter. So it's fun. It's nice to have, and he loves everything I do. So there's no notes of any kind. It's just like talking about what you said earlier. I just do what I do, and he loves it. So that's fun. That's worth not getting paid very much.
If the money's not good, I'm sure you get great wine gifts from him at the end of the.
I do that, yeah.
One thing that really kind of struck me was when Netflix's wonderful Chef's Table came out, how inspiring I found watching that show and seeing those professionals do their job. I found it much more inspiring than, documentaries about musicians or composers or conductors. Does wine and food kind of occupy a similar inspirational area in your life? Do you find that that's your sort of well to go to in terms of inspiration or getting away from the everyday craft of what you do?
I'm always amazed at composers that don't cook or don't appreciate wine, because they're so related to me. You think about what it takes to give birth to a wine. Like it grows in the field, which is basically elegant farming, and then you have to nurture it and take care of it. And then when you enjoy a bottle of wine, it comes to your table and the waiter, he shows you the bottle, pulls the cork out. You have an anticipation of what you think it's going to be like. Then you actually have it. And then when it's done, you can reflect on it. Now, how is that different than going to the opera or going to a symphony? You walk in and you have this feeling, what am I going to experience? You experience it, and afterward, you look back at it and you absorb it. It's consumed in real time, right? Unlike a painting where you can go from where the artist probably wants your eye to follow the journey, and then you can do it again. It doesn't work that way with music. Music is in real time. You experience it emotionally in real time, as you do with eating food or as you do with texture of what you're crunching or drinking. So to me, I find them all related to each other. And I love cooking. I'm the cook of my household. I feel like a bit of a restaurant line chef at times with I love elegant cooking. I love elegant food. We just went away for the Mother's Day weekend and had a very elegant dinner. I just love everything about the finesse, the craftsmanship, the artistry of really great fine dining. It just speaks to me.
Do you think we can ever expect Morris wines coming to our LCBO at some point in the future?
One of my dreams.
Really?
Oh yeah. If I ever retire, I'm not sure we ever really retire in this business, but I picture myself in a vineyard somewhere.
Amazing.
I proposed to my wife in Napa. We got married in Napa. I'm a wine collector. I have about 2,000 bottles of wine in my wine.
Wow.
Yeah.
By all accounts, I mean, I've seen many, if not all, those wine documentaries as well, because they are very inspiring. But by all accounts, that world seems also very high stress, high level, kind of like, I guess if you're doing it as a business as opposed to just for yourself and for fun.
The quick story. I've only asked for 2 autographs in my entire life. One was Bruce Hornsby. He was my piano hero. He did a concert in Toronto at Manta when it was still there. And the other one was Thomas Keller, the chef of the French Laundry, the greatest American chef ever. He was consulting. He does a lot of celebrity consulting on movies. Like he's the guy who made the Ratatouille. He cooked it and then animated it based on his. Oh wow! Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. And we were working on a movie with Adam Sandler in Zimmer days with Adam Sandler called Spanglish, a very successful movie. James L. Brooks, huge producer.
Yeah.
And Thomas Keller was brought in to teach Adam Sandler how to cook. He has the blue apron like Thomas Keller, so he was a consultant. So we're back at the studio working on the show, and James L. Brooks brought Thomas Keller to Zimmer's room. We hung out and was talking and drinking wine and drinking great wine. We were having a whole culinary conversation in front of the room that no one understood but me and him. It was hysterical. Even Zimmer was like, "What the fuck are they talking about over there?" I was like, "Where do you find good demi-glace and how do you like all this sort of geeky stuff?" But anyway, I brought my cookbook like a schoolboy and asked him if he would sign it. So
amazing.
That one's in my kitchen as constant inspiration. But the French Laundry, which is in my opinion, the greatest American restaurant, one of the greatest restaurants in the world, is such an example of precision and craft and artistry, and everything about it is astounding to me. And his approach to it, and having built it, and the way he constructs it, and the way he organizes his walk-in refrigerator, all that stuff to me speaks to the organization of music, the cultivation of a craft first and foremost, and then art is on top of that. You can't conceptualize a dish if you can't cook it. So I find there's a lot of I'm going off a little deep end here, but
no, that's great.
That speak to me, and it's kind of part of my soul, I guess.
Speaking of Keller, there's sort of another parallel, which is that he's moved away from the brutality of the brigade system. And that sort of like chefs throwing dishes at their sous chefs that aren't up to par or whatever. And I guess maybe what we were talking about earlier, this move away from the Harvey Weinsteins of the world. Mm-hmm. That's sort of a nice parallel. And I think that Keller proves that you can have an incredibly precise, amazingly well-crafted, experience and an art that you're delivering without that kind of brutality. So that's actually a very positive thing, I think.
Yeah, there's another chef, Eric Repair, who runs the most celebrated seafood restaurant in New York City, among them, called Le Bernardin, and he is a very Zen, Dalai Lama kind of guy. And he talks a lot about his interviews, having been raised as a young French chef and having dishes thrown at him, hot dishes on his apron when it wasn't good enough, and that when he took over Le Bernardin when the original partner died, he promised to bring an era of Zen to it. It's a very quiet kitchen, very relaxed. Everyone's in their space. No one yells. There's a lot of autonomy. So he is the opposite. He took the experience of, it's like me working with Hans is an incredibly difficult environment, incredibly difficult, hard guy to work for, big pressure, big movies. And instead of it being fear-based and belittlement and all that shit, it's Eric Repair's version of it is that. And I'm trying to bring that to my world as well when I can, and try to human being first.
Right.
Show some empathy.
That's fantastic. So you have your wonderful AMA series on YouTube, which we'll link to. Trevor is giving away incredible insights and sharing his passion for what he does, both technical and artistic, and of course with the the interpersonal relationships and the director-composer relationship. Where else can people find you online and follow you?
If you go to any of my social, there's a Linktree link that has access to all my stuff, whether it be my website, which is my name, trevormorris.com, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, link to my Spotify. It's a Linktree. Any one of my social will have the link to it.
Great.
I think I'm at Trevor Morris Composer on most of them, but they're all a little bit different.
We'll put some links in the notes for sure. Any parting words or asks of the audience before we let you go?
No, I think the one thing that's interesting, a perspective that I struggle with, is being a Canadian living in the States. Howard Shore, when I was in Toronto, had just finished Saturday Night Live as music director, and for Cronenberg, that relationship had started, and he was on his trajectory and has lived in upstate New York ever since, a town called Tuxedo, New York. I think Michael Dan has gone back and forth between Toronto and LA because he's such a superstar. And I find that there's a perception about us Canadians who live in LA as a little bit of traitors, a little bit in some way. But I said it earlier when you asked the questions. I was not moving to Hollywood like I'm moving to Hollywood, baby. I just went pragmatically because that's where the work was. And I built a life here, and I met my wife here, and I have kids here, and all that stuff. But I mean, people say, "Where are you from?" It's Toronto, man. That's my hometown. That's where I started my career. And all my family's there. Well, I've been able to see them because of COVID. You guys got to get your COVID act together, by the way.
Yeah, no kidding.
But no, I just think that it's one of those things that I wish people could be more inside my head, and how much I am an Englishman in New York. I'm an alien here in California. But, it's tough. I wish in a way that I could split my time between Toronto and LA. That would be, for me, I would spend August through Canadian Thanksgiving every year in Canada. The change of colors are hard to beat, see my family and stuff like that. So, it's something that's always on my mind, kind of being, having one foot in one place, having my heart be in Canada,
Right.
I'm nominated for a CSA award this year for the final episode of Vikings. And, it would, this isn't a plug for the vote. It's just like, it would mean so much to me to win that award because it's our Golden Globes, Canada. I love going to the CSA Awards. Unfortunately, it's virtual this year, which it should be because of COVID. But that award strangely holds a lot of value in my heart. So I'm hoping to put one of those on my shelf someday.
Nice. That's wonderful. Well, Trevor, thank you so much for taking the time. Congrats on everything. Congrats on. I'm sure it's both happy and kind of sad to see Vikings go. There's a little ways to go still, I think, for you, but that's a huge success. All the other shows you worked on. I think everyone I know and that's on the radar that knows you is very proud of everything you've done for Canada as a Canadian composer living in LA. So I don't think you have to worry too much about that. And thanks so much for taking the time today. It was a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for your candid, insights into everything, and for sharing your passion for music with us.
Oh, man, those are very kind words. Thank you for having me. I will part ways with this saying. On my website, there's an email you can reach me at. I think it's asktrevor at something, But if you're out there and you're a young Canadian composer and you're 16 or 24 or 44, if I can help you at all, whether it just be advice or something like that, just email me and just put in the subject matter, like Canadian composer or something. Like I get flooded with this stuff, but I have a soft spot for every time a Canadian asks me to have coffee, I always say yes. I get someone, hey, I'm from Toronto and I'm going to be in LA. Would you have coffee with me? I always say yes, because I just remember when I was that guy, I didn't get a ton of help, but the people who did help me really made a difference in my confidence ability and maybe a little hookup or a little something. So if I can reach down and do that for anybody else, it'd be my pleasure.
Well, that's very generous. Thanks again, Trevor. Have a great one.
You too.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider showing your support by giving the show a 5-star rating and sharing the episodes with your friends and followers. The Screen Composer Studio is produced by myself, Adrian Ellis. Graphics and post-production assistance by Nick Grimshaw. Special thanks to our managing director, Tanya Dedrick, as well as Charlie Finley, Elizabeth Hannon, and Gagan Singh for their support. For more information on the SCGC, please visit www.screencomposers.ca and follow us online at Screen Composers, or reach out at tscs@screencomposers.ca.